Welcome back to this Live Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News Channel. With me, I have Professor Anthony Kila, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, CIAPS. I also have Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Gentlemen, good to see you again on the program. Well, we've had three guests today, as you know. First, Dr. Franklin Ugu, Director of Public Policy Initiative at the Lagos Business School, commenting on inflation, rising food prices, and the policies that have been put in place by the Tinubu government, whether those policies are working or not, and the issues with policy formulation and outcomes. And then we had the Managing Director, CEO of the Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority of Nigeria, Alhaji Bamanga Jada, talking about, oil multinationals divesting from onshore assets and shallow waters in Nigeria. And he's saying, well, it's not as if they are leaving the country, that they're actually diversifying and, reshaping their portfolio in Nigeria. And that, Nigeria is in fact benefiting from that and other issues. And then the third subject with Mike Ejiofor, state police. Will it work or not? He is an advocate of state police, and he thinks we shouldn't worry about the abuses. It can work. And that as for funding, well, we just look for the money and fund it. And he doesn't agree that fasting and praying will solve the problem of insecurity. Let me start with you, Professor Kila.
I need fasting and praying. The three interventions, I've all spoken well. I am for state policing. I've said it publicly. I've written about it. And I think those who worry about abuses are the legitimate concern. But what we need to do is not to trust and obey, but rather put in place mechanisms, law, regulations, and strong institutions that will not allow abuse to happen. I mean, what are people saying? Are they saying it's better for us to be abused by Abuja or not by our governors? No, it is better not to be abused at all. And the state security is the right way to go. It's not going to happen overnight, but we don't have to wait for it to happen as a year, for a whole year, like Dr. Franklin Ugo sort of hinted at. It is something that, if we believe in it, we can put in place things to make it happen sooner than later, especially because we have some templates to follow, not just the Amotekun, which those who are deriding it then, who are against it then, I hope they see now that we were right, they were wrong when we move for our Amotekun then. So I think it's a good thing. In terms of so we should work towards that and make sure it happens in the right way. It will really help a lot. In terms of the comment of the Free Zone CEO, I think he speaks vision. The students of management will learn from this interview the difference between a CEO and a managing director. He spoke more like a CEO than a managing director because he spoke of vision and what he ought to be. But unfortunately, the problem he has is the reality of today. There's no point saying we're getting a lot of investments if people are not feeling the investments. Maybe they will feel it in the future, hopefully, because, one prays for Nigeria, as we have been asked to do by my colleague and friend, Governor of Borno State. Maybe not fast, but then again, we are in lead, those who can't shoot anyway. We hope for the best. But at the moment, all these investments they're saying are coming in are not being felt. That is just the reality. We need to say it, not to say anybody's not saying the truth, but so that we can know what is good and what is bad, and we can push for what is good. The comment on the real economy, inflation, food crisis, that is the biggest topic in town now. It is the biggest because it is the most visible, it is what most people are feeling, and it is what does not require article of faith, prayer, or partisan position to understand. It is staring at you in the face. So it must be said that lately, in the last 2 weeks or so, the government has shown to be aware of what is going on in the country, and they have tried to respond. The responses appear a bit confused because within 48 hours, we had two opposing positions. So it is good if people debate and come up with synthesis of antitheses. But I think it is better if government thinks thoroughly things before they announce it, and they consider the options very well. Because this idea of saying we're going to import, then we're not going to import, we're going to have a price control board or commission or policy, then we're not going to have it. It does not speak well. It doesn't show depth. And it is arguable that that is part of why we're where we are today. So I'll advise government, yes, to be responsive, yes, to be cognizant of what is going on, but to think it through before they take a position. Now to the position taken. So the idea of fixing price is something I am allergic to. It is not something that can work. I can understand my friend and brother Femi Falana. I understand he's an activist, more of a socialist than anything, and he feels the pain of the people, so he says, let's fix the price. That is good intention, but you see, we have to be careful because good intention in governance is not enough. We have to be very practical about things. I think it's a good idea. Well, actually, it's not a good idea. It's a good intention to say, let us make sure the price of food does not go up, essential commodity, so that people can afford it. But fixing it is a very dangerous thing to try to do. It's going to create chaos. It's going to make business fold, and then it's going to create black markets. It's not something, it's against economy, which some of us call natural law. It's not going to work. What needs to be done is to find a way to reduce the price by increasing the supply, by subsidizing where necessary, by facilitating entrance into the market and allowing things to happen, by, if possible, and this is a radical thing that must be said. The other question is import food or not. Now let's delve into that very quickly. I think it's a strange thing to want, but given where we are, if possible, I would say let us import food as a very temporary measure, whilst we then grow our own. So to make sure people don't die before the one we want to grow come to fall. But there is a question, there is a political economic question there that we need to understand if we want to deal with it. It's a macroeconomic question. You import food to reduce price if you thoroughly believe that what we're facing is lack of enough food. That is scarcity. That is when you say, okay, let us bring in more to assure it, the supply side. But if what we're dealing with, and I try not to use technical terms, but if what we're dealing with is a cost push inflation, i.e., if it's an inflation due to high cost of production and distribution, then we have a problem, because what that means is that the products are there, but the prices are high because the cost of getting the gari, which you're looking at, to the market is expensive due to the cost of petrol. Then we have a problem there. And some people are arguing that if you go to the market, the products are there. The problem is that people cannot afford them. Then we have to rethink what we're going to do about it. But I think it is important for everybody to understand that we are indeed a moment of emergency and crisis, and we have to deal with the situation with that kind of mindset.
Professor Aworawo, fasting and praying and praying so that Nigeria will be secure. Do you agree?
I'll take that last. I will begin with the food thing, the inflation thing. That one is existential. Yeah, we've seen in the past couple of weeks protests all over the place. Somebody went to the market, wanted to buy, I don't know, that rice or beans, and he was told the price. What he had couldn't buy it because what he brought was probably like the last time he bought it. And he started crying. He burst into a paroxysm of tears. And they were trying to console him, but consolation would not bring food to his family. And he kept on emphasizing it until one woman came and added some money to just, to what he had. So he could, So it's real. It's real. These figures are even so low. They don't reflect the reality, but they are going up. The only thing that makes sense is that the inflation is going up. But by how much percent? All this percent we are seeing, 29.9, is just not nowhere near the reality. So there is hunger in the land. That's the long and short. And this is surprising given how much support farmers were supposed to have got under the last government. There's supposed to be food everywhere now, because every other week you heard government, agriculture ministry, CBN governor coming out to say, we're giving this assistance, that assistance, this billion, that billion. It makes it surprising that after all that, we are where we are. So government needs to take a look at all of that. What are we producing? What are we not producing enough? Where can assistance be rendered so that, as the year goes, rainy season is coming now, what can they, assist farmers to grow more so that there will be food in the next couple of months? There are things you can grow. Then in the next few months, you see an expansion in the food production. How do we prepare for dry season farming? And make it something that is consistent such that it is not episodic. These are things that government will need to do so that, there will be stability. So whether they should import or not, government has always imported food. As we speak now, food is being imported. The question is, what do we import? What are those things we don't need? We don't have enough that, should be imported. That is the question. Government has always imported food. The issue is what quantity and what commodity, what product is imported. But like Professor Kila said, I'm happy that government is paying attention and trying to do this, do that. And of course, just like he also said, there needs to be more, it needs to be more functional. There needs to be robust cogitation as to what the right course of action should be so that, this problem can be tackled. There's hunger in the land. Many people supported the government. We say, look, when we supported, we thought things would be better than this, so please pay attention. And of course, the government is paying attention, and we hope that in the next few months, these things will be addressed more effectively, such that people don't die of hunger. As we speak, people are literally dying of hunger. The local content in the oil industry, many of the major players are, shifting everything offshore. The onshore production they are leaving to, and the reasons they give, they have so many challenges. Some of them arising from the way they have operated. They have not operated professionally enough in some areas. Some of them also arising from the local communities. Pipes are broken, and when there's oil spill, they say it's the company, and the company is taking all sorts of complications. The young man said it's an advantage. It depends on how they operate. How they operate will determine whether it's actually advantageous or not. Many local players have already come in before now. And of course, more are coming in, given the departure of the big players. How they operate, like you asked the question regarding local communities, that is not just environmental issues, the plight of local communities. These are key issues. The issue, in days of yore, people didn't just go and start breaking pipes. Breaking pipes is a more recent thing, arising from neglect. So if you operate in a professional manner in which the local communities are carried along and their interests are taken care of, the challenges that is making these big players want to sell off, they'll be able to address it, and they'll be able to operate, professionally. Now, state police, where we've always said that all crime is local, and then tackling crime should also be local. So it's an idea whose time has long come, but better late than never, as they say. Abuse, yes, the fears are legitimate. We have had, in the First Republic, we had issues along that line, and when you also look at how elections are conducted, the state elections, the local government elections, we see how the party in power just sweeps everything. It gives you an idea as to what is possible when there is, of course, many you have to put in place to ensure that this is addressed, so that the abuse are taken care of. If we say because of abuse, the state police should not be encouraged. It's like throwing away the baby with the bathwater, which would not be nice. The abuses will be taken care of, and hopefully moving forward, when these things are done neatly, they will help us to address the intricate security challenges that we now face.
Well, let's take our next subject, Alexei Navalny. Hundreds of people leave flowers and candles at the Trocadero in Paris to pay tribute to Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny, who died in his cell on Friday. This is as world leaders continue to point accusing fingers at Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has been described as a thorn in their flesh. With portraits, candles, and flowers, thousands of people around the world pay their respects to Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny after Russia's prison agency announced that he had died in an Arctic penal colony at the age of 47 in Russia, after initially allowing people in several cities to lay flowers at monuments to victims of Soviet-era repression. Police sealed off some of the areas and started making arrests. In St. Petersburg, a group of people waved their mobile phone flashlights at the memorial to victims of political repression.
It's a shame that a politician like that can be killed by Putin, just because Putin wants to. I like the fact that here, there are lots of people who just want to lay flowers, candles, because that's all you can do from here. And I know that if you're in Russia, if you live in Russia, it's really complicated to hold rallies, to change something in a visible way. I don't know what to think. I hope it will change something, because every year gets darker and darker. And really, I think there will come a time when people in Russia will realize that we've lost everything in life. We've lost everything we had, because of him, because of Putin.
Because this is what Alexei Navalny would have done. Because yesterday they killed our hope that one day there will be positive change. That is why, to pay tribute to an exceptional person. Our presence here and in other countries is an indication that there are people who believe in freedom one day for Russia, that this whole gang of criminals is going to leave and will, be judged, that responsibilities will be assigned. That's why we are here.
Well, President Biden of the US says Putin is responsible for this. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, says that Putin will kill whoever he wants. But the issue is, yes, beyond repression, is this also linked to the coming elections in Russia, which will be next month, which is almost certain to keep Putin, president of Russia, in power till 2030. These are the issues. But let me start with you, Professor Aworawo.
I want to begin by saying that it's so sad that at the end of the day, Alexei Navalny has died. He as one additional important figure to the many opposition figures that have died in Russia under Putin. I personally think that after his treatment, after he was poisoned and his treatment, when he came back, I expressed this fears that he will not be safe and that he will likely be eliminated. And now, the fears expressed have come to pass. I personally, wanted him to stay back. There will be more effective fighting alive, outside, than being inside Russia and then being clamped in cell, and after which it will be announced that he has died. And that is what has happened. It is really surprising that in 2024, we can have a country in Europe with this kind of extreme authoritarianism, where one man calls the shot. He simply stepped aside, put somebody there for a few years, came back, and now elections are around the corner. It will be there till 2030, and the oppression and repression continues. It is really disheartening that Russia has to go through this. At this time in its history, it's also surprising that Russians are not able to, form a critical mass, support one candidate, and then vote massively for the person and free themselves. I mean, it's supposed to be a at least in theory, a democratic, system. But we are where we are. It's a tragedy of immense proportion, and we are so sad that Navalny has eventually died from his stance, his position that Russia has to be free from, the clutches of Vladimir Putin.
Professor Kila?
Well, I think I was surprised initially when we heard the news of the death and allowed people to lay flowers. That was very on Russia and on the Putin. So, I'm not surprised that now they've stopped them from doing so, and it is, well done to the rest of the world for allowing the memorial, which in reality is a protest against Putin's Russia, to go on outside Russia. I think it will go on more because it is clear now that the voice of opposition cannot be heard inside Russia, so people will allow it to be heard outside Russia. for the rest of the world and for prosperity. The lesson here is that we should be careful. Professor Aworawo was wondering how this is possible, in 2024 in Europe. One, because Russia has always had a peculiar case for about 600 years. Those who are familiar with the history of that part of the world will know that the development of Russia has always been a peculiar one. But more importantly, in our times today, the thing to look at is for people to understand that this idea of a strong man is always dangerous. It is a system, a society that is dependent on one strong man that always end up in a situation where opposition leaders are killed, opposition voices are stifled, and the normal liberal debate and conversations cannot be aired. So we need to be careful about that. But I think at some point, Putin needs to understand that he cannot go on to run a system where opposition people keep getting accidents and dying. At some point, these accidents will not be believable anymore. And those who are close to him should tell him to have the courage to let him understand that. And they need to review their system. Russians cannot stand up because the democracy is not real. And that's the lesson to the rest of the world, that if you want to save your tomorrow, you have to fight very well. You have to be vigilant and courageous to have a system that works.
Okay, we have an update on Senegal, which we discussed last week. President Macky Sall of Senegal said on Friday that he will comply with a ruling from Senegal's Constitutional Council, which a day earlier rejected his plan to postpone the presidential election. The president's office issued a statement that said the head of state will conduct necessary consultations to hold the presidential election as soon as possible. Sall had come under pressure both at home and abroad to reverse his decision to delay the election for about 10 months. Earlier Friday, the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, had called on Sall to follow the court's order, saying all stakeholders in the electoral process should comply with the decision of the Constitutional Council. The election was originally set for February 25. The president, whose second term ends in April and has said he's not running for a third term, declared this month that he was postponing the vote and won approval from Parliament to move it to December. But now it looks like a good reason will prevail in Senegal. It looks like the rule of law will prevail. Yesterday, the Senegalese in Dakar, they were able to protest in what looked like an official permission and recognition of the right of the people to protest. And they were saying, look, free Sonko, we want him. We're against, postponement of election. We want free democracy. And although the gendarmes were out yesterday, where they didn't brutalize anybody, as they did previously, killing 3 persons, and as they did previously, allowing only the opposition to postpone the election till December 25. And now, if the ruling of the Constitutional Court is to be followed, it can't be challenged anyway. It means the election will have to take place sometime in March. President Macky Sall has not yet announced a date. Let me start with you again, Professor Kila.
Well, I think it must be said, because people like me, let me not add other people, because some of us are very quick to criticize ECOWAS, as a toothless tiger when they're not acting. It must be said that in this situation, because of what is going on with the 3 rebellious or Protestant countries, as they were, depending on how you look at them, ECOWAS understand that what is going on in Senegal puts them on trial, indicts them, and I think they're playing well, because when you talk about influence, you were subtle about it in your report to say influence from home and abroad. Other Francophone papers talk a lot explicitly about the influence of ECOWAS countries. So it must be said that people realize that the reason why those breaking away from ECOWAS are able to do so is because they can accuse ECOWAS of not protecting people and democracy. And Senegal is an example of when they can do that, and I think they are doing that. So the president of Senegal realizes that he can't just play the mad horse. So he's tracing back his steps. The question now to see is that we're assuming that the court will come up with a reasonable judgment. That is left to be seen. He says he's going to comply with whatever the court says, but let's wait to see what the court says.
Well, Professor Aworawo.
Yeah, Montesquieu in L'Esprit de Loi advocated for separation of powers.
Yes.
As a way of checking the excesses of those who abuse power. Power corrupts. When it's absolutely corrupts, absolutely. That has played out glaringly now in the case of Senegal. Senegal was a country adrift until 2 days ago when this court made the ruling. The ruling has now steered Senegal back to some order, to some direction. Because protests were on, people were being killed, people were being, injured and all. And there seemed to be no direction, but now there's direction. The court has ruled that elections will be conducted as soon as possible. It do not likely hold 25th of February as initially scheduled. It's too short. They have to campaign, they have to prepare and all that. But it says as soon as possible. I would have been happier if the court had said
date.
Not more than 2 months from the previous date. Because as soon as possible could also mean even December. We hope that reason will prevail in negotiating after consultation and fixing a fresh date when elections will be held. But to come to Macky Sall, he has called it an own goal. An own goal. All will be remembered for now is the crisis that this election has brought. And it won't stay it will still maybe 2-3 months longer than it will have stayed. So for 2-3 months, he has simply destroyed his legacy. And these are the lessons that leaders must learn. That they should know that there's a time comes where you have to leave. And for Macky Sall, it's very disheartening because he's been in government for 20 years. He was prime minister under Abdoulaye Wade. Right. 2004, he came into government. This is 2024. After 20 years, he still wants to hang on. Anyway, but we are happy for the Senegalese, and we hope that they'll be able to use the court's judgment to negotiate a reasonable time for election and for a new government to come in. The other thing is the opposition. We hope also that because Macky Sall released some political, detainees a few days ago. We hope that Sonko and some others will also be released so they can come and be part of the political process. Perhaps that may also help to also wash away some of his sins if he now allows the whole thing freely and let whoever the Senegalese want to win the election and then succeed him. Perhaps that will help to clear some of the things the stains already on him. But we are happy that at last there is some direction in the politics of Senegal.
Okay, very quickly, let's take our last topic, and this has to do with organized labor, announcing that it's going to go on a warning strike for 2 days, February 27 and February 28. And after that warning strike, it will give a notice for another 7 days. And if government still does not honor the 16-point agreement that was reached in October 2023, then organized labor will have no option, as decided by its National Executive Committee, to embark on a nationwide indefinite strike. Last week, we discussed this when Labour decided to go on to announce a 2-week, to serve a 2-week notice. And that 2 weeks notice expired. There was a meeting on Monday, which was deadlocked. And here we are, with even, National Association of Road Transport Owners threatening to down tools and, asking NUPENG to join. And Nigerians, in addition to the hardship in the country, may well be faced with a crisis also of fuel scarcity. Professor Aworawo.
Yeah, Labour is right. Of course, we discussed the inflation already and the fact that Nigerians are hungry, people are literally dying of hunger. All of this needs to be addressed. So, and of course, for those who work for government, the promises made not being fulfilled. These are real issues. So Labour is right in saying if government does not, live up to what it has promised, there will be a warning strike. But just like we said last week, government needs to be more open. For instance, let me just give an example. One of the issues, presented by Labour is the ASU issue. The promises, that government made has not been fulfilled. Yes, true.
You can't resist the temptation to talk about
yes, no, because we are part of the Labour team. It's one of the items. Now, in the past few days, government has started implementing some of these things. For instance, the 4 months life they said they paid 1 month, and then I'm just hearing now that they have paid the second. Government should be more open. that we promise to pay you 4 months, we don't have the money now, we'll pay it this way. The government should be open. Call labor, let all these things be put on the table. The promises made that have not been fulfilled, this is how we'll go about fulfilling, giving the resources at our disposal. That is what government needs to do. We don't need another strike. That's either warning strike or any strike of any type at this time. But government needs to be more, for instance, if government had come to us and say, look, we promise to pay 4 months, this is how the thing will be, staggered because of our resources. We will show understanding. But, Nicodemously, 1 month, and then nobody knows when the other month will. That is not how things ought to be. So if government does that, I'm sure this strike will be averted, and we can move on, smoothly, without all the controversies and the topsy-turvy that always accompany strikes.
Professor Kila.
I agree about the openness of government. I think at the moment government is trying to be authoritative based on power. I think government needs to try an approach of leadership based on humility. And I believe that based on what is going on in the country, where everybody can see that this is not a time when the country should have any form of interruption like strike, what the government needs to do is to openly, transparently beg labor. Say to them.
No, they are already begging.
And yes.
The Minister of Information is begging.
Yes.
The Minister of State for Labor is also begging.
Specificity on implementation.
I think exactly. That is where the openness that we talk about comes. It's not just a symbolic begging. It's a begging that shows intention and concrete plan. To say, look, there is no money. Bear with us. Let us together look at it and say, this is what we're going to do. And I think they need to sort of have the humble courage of saying, our plan is not to increase wages, but to reduce prices. So work together with us to achieve this. The problem the government is having is that they seem to lack the moral authority to be able to do that. You cannot beg if you're buying SUVs. Whilst that is not a big thing in terms of figures, in terms of the whole budget, the symbolic message of you begging when you're coming with manicured fingers or wearing tuxedo to beg, as I've said in other occasions. This figure of a beggar in tuxedo does not work. A beggar has to be humble, it has to look dry, it has to come from fasting and prayer. And it has to be seen to be fasting and prayerful.
Anyway, on that note, thank you very much, Professor Kila. Thank you very much, Professor Aworawo. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.